the agenda, and this is kind of how it's going to flow today. Being a young adult in today's world, we're going to talk a little bit about the vulnerabilities, okay, of this, and I'll call it a high risk population. Not only is it the high risk population about three particular vulnerabilities I'm going to speak to, it's during a very transitional time in your life. I mean, if you have kids, young adult children, right, who are in college now, of course you know what I'm speaking to. If you see young adults in the college environment, as I do, uh, you kind of know. And if you went to college, now I'm going to age myself. You see my bald head. I'm 55. I was in college in the mid 80s. And I purposely, when I was writing this and putting this together with Allison, I was thinking about my college years. I might even bring up a few examples of when I was in school way back in the day. But we know these young adults are impressionable with limited life experience, although they are adults, right? But they're in that college environment that we're going to talk about, which might speed things up as far as any type of addiction disorder, right? Substances or behavioral. So we'll talk to that first. And this is going to be a review. And in full transparency, some of this I grabbed from the core training, but I think it's worth a talk. Okay, so we'll start there. Then we're going to talk about all the games for college age folks where these games are really heavily marketed. They're very accessible and available to college students. Why? I always raise my phone because, a lot of games and gambling can be done right from our phones, right? I'm going to talk about, I think I have 5 or 6 case examples I'm going to speak to that might serve as an unrealistic portrayal of, and a lot of them are in movies. A lot of them are in movies like the movie 21. It's going to be unrealistic portrayals that could influence someone of the young adult age range in college, right? Now, I didn't take out gaming. I've got about 3 slides about gaming in here. I'm going to tell you, I don't think we're going to be able to get to them, but you guys know in our work, and if you are parents of young adults and adolescents, and even right pre-adolescents, gaming's a big part of a lot of kids' lifestyles, even in college. What does gaming do? Does it cause the same financial devastation that gambling does? It can. But really what gaming does is it takes that person out of areas of their life that they should be focusing on, like, I don't know, maybe studying, right? So if I have time, I'll hit on it, but it's really with gaming, it's the time that it takes away from the college student at a very, very important transitional, challenging time for someone who's 18, 19, 20 in their first years of college. And then finally, as we know, some of us can speak from experience, the college environment can encourage, we'll just say encourage experimentation with substances, recreational activities, all these things, which makes our young adults, when mixed with those vulnerabilities I'm about to speak to, it can make them very suspect to comorbid conditions, binge drinking, alcohol use disorder, all these things. I'm going to talk a little bit about that connection as well. But I'm going to open up with an activity. Yes, I know this is a webinar. Yes, I know this really isn't a class, but I love this piece that I found actually when I was putting this together, I think out of the New York Times about, and I'll tell you a little bit more. We're going to have to do this through chat because I am in webinar mode. I still haven't figured out how I can allow you guys to speak. If I could, I would. I'd rather that because we don't have a whole lot on. Well, we've got 23 on today, including myself. But I want you to chat your answers. And this is, I say this is an exercise, but we can do this together. I really like this because I want this to get you thinking about the exposure. And here we're going to talk about casino gambling when it's in close geographical proximity to college life and college campuses, right? So this is a true story. This is an article I found. Again, I think it was in the Times. You can Google this and to find out really what happened here. But let's pretend that it's in Illinois. And by the way, I think we have some casinos near some college campuses, even in the Chicago area, right? If you think about Rivers and Joliet, and proximity to to some schools there. But what happened? This was about 6, 7 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer. There were 16 proposals in New York to build 4 casinos within a 25-mile radius of a college or a university. 3 of them were actually kind of put in pen there to be within 3 minutes from some very large universities. So, casinos like the Hard Rock and some others were going, they started licking their chops. And I think that was strategic. Okay. So, I mean, 3 minutes from large schools there in New York. The only rule that the state of New York said is, hey, we don't want these in Manhattan. We don't want that. In fact, we want them all upstate. They couldn't be in any of the 5 boroughs. Okay. So the Hard Rock International proposed a plan to build just 3 miles away from the College of St. Rose and 8 miles from the University of Albany. Traditions Resort and Casino started a plan to build less than 3 miles away from Union College and Schenectady, I always mispronounce that, County Community College. So think about it if you're a young person in school and you can look right out your window of your dorm and see the bright lights of a casino. Think about that. That's the case. This was a real case, okay? So what would I like to do is what I want you to look at is I want you to look at your screen here. Have you guys ever done a SWOT analysis? I think I don't know if I've done one of these for training in Illinois, but I used to do this in casinos. I would do this, I do this in some other webinars. I did this in North Carolina, but a SWOT analysis is you take a case like a business case and you list the strengths and the opportunities, and then you list the weaknesses and the threats. Now, if you're a private practitioner, a therapist, you probably do this with clients, right? It's like taking an inventory. If you're in a 12-step program or you do some 12-step facilitation in sessions, you probably know about inventories. Hey, let's write down the good, the bad, and the ugly about this situation or about yourself. So that's what I want you to think about with this case. And what do I mean? Now, don't look too close at the writing here because we're not going to be able to group up. I'm not in person here. But what I want you to do is I want you to chat me, and let's pretend, we can even pretend if this is in Illinois, that there were proposals to build four casinos within a 3-mile radius, let's say. I know they said 25-mile radius, but the Hard Rock and a couple of other casinos were already gearing up just to be a couple of miles away. Now, I know you're thinking, what the heck would a strength look like? Now, I want you to be open-minded here. Would there be strengths and opportunities? Think about it. Think about tax revenues from casinos. Think about a lot of things. So chat me if you would. And I'm going to open the chat. What do you think some strengths? Oh, thank you, Carrick. Danville is supposed to be, okay, taxes, jobs. Thank you, Christine. Jobs. Yes. What else? Very good, Ellen. Thank you. What about the town? Let's think about more than the students, but you can think about the faculty, the students, the city, fun things to do. Thank you, Lisa. It's a tourist, exactly. Additional entertainment options, funding for education. Thank you, Doug. Really good. Yeah, there's some strength and opportunities here, I think. Funding for education, absolutely. Brings in other businesses around the casino. There's buzz and excitement. Expansion of businesses, yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's do, because of what we do for a living, this is probably easier for you. List some weaknesses and threats. Think about students. Think about the town. Think about every level. I'm a social worker, right? And I know I've got some other social workers on here, but if you're a social worker, an LCPC, or a psychologist, temptations, crime, absolutely. Students missing class. Thank you, Anna. Yes, Carrick. Yeah, they'll come in from any state, right? Loss of money. Yes, Christine. Possibility, yes, of addiction disorder. Thank you, Luann. Distraction, failing grades. Perfect. You guys get it, right? So there was some fallout. Normalizes. Thank you, Nina. Yeah, that exactly normalizes gambling. And Nina, I think what you're saying here, a lot of what we're going to talk about is we can do some prevention stuff like educating the community that surrounds where a new casino might go, because we know Illinois. There's 6 more coming. I think 2 have already hit the ground now on top of the 10 that we have. But anywhere where a casino is going to go up, there's some threats to the community. Now, we're gambling neutral at LifeWorks, and I think I can speak for Kelly and Jim here too at the Illinois Department of Human Services. I'm personally not for or against gambling. I'm just here to serve those who can't do it in a healthy way. I'm that way with alcohol use disorder, right? I'm not personally a prohibition person, but listen, this can be threatening to different communities for different reasons, and particularly so with building so close to a campus. Now, from the article, I wanted to show you a couple of examples of the way the schools saw it and the city saw it, more so the school, as a threat. One teacher at Binghamton said, "We don't need a casino within a short drive to a district to attract our college students who, all over this country, are already burdened with monumental student debt." Now, I'm going to talk about some reasons why they're so vulnerable. And a young student with student debt, in and of itself, seeing maybe an opportunity to make some money, right, through gambling, that temptation can come if they're not educated or they know the true odds and how this addiction disorder is real. It's very comparable to a substance use disorder, right? The chairwoman at one of the schools said, "Hey, perhaps it's going to be an added concern that parents have." I mean, think about if one of your children, adult children, decided to go to a school where, again, outside the window, they see a casino, right? And so that's going to put some stress and worry on parents. Sometimes they may not be as adept at handling money as they should be, and it's just one more environment where students have an opportunity to drink too much. Think about that, guys. In a lot of the casinos I've been to, if you're gambling, how much does drinking cost? I might get some chats there. It's free. Think about that. You know, I personally don't have children. I just have a bulldog that you might hear bark here and there while I'm doing this webinar. But I can think back to when I was at school, and if I knew where free drinks were, I don't want to self-disclose too much. You guys will kick me out of the webinar. But you see where I'm going here. You know, with the alcohol, especially if it's free and there's gambling and you're 21 years old and you become of age, right? But now I want to back because I first asked about the strengths. You know, there are more than what you think here on what the town and the community and the school said. There was a freshman at Binghamton that said, "Hey, I think it's going to be very popular. You know, some students are pressed for money, but that's a big red flag, right? If they think this is a money maker scheme." Another senior at the College of St. Rose in Albany said, "Hey, last year Dave and Buster's opened up at the Cross Gates Mall down the road, and that was a huge hit with students." Dave and Buster's is a little different than Harris, right? So that's kind of showing you where that even though they're young adults, a lot of these students are still somewhat, they're coming right out of adolescence, and some of them still are at 18, 19. But think about these things too, because some of these colleges really honed in on what they saw as opportunity too, maybe some good opportunity. Some of the colleges offered casino management associate degree programs with potential intern opportunities, right? And with that, part of the curriculum, if that was their path, these students had to take courses in addiction disorder, which I think is great, right? Traditions Resort and Casino, they had plans to partner with colleges in other internships and jobs, at the casino. And the Hard Rock also said, of course, the Hard Rock's going to say this, but they said, "Hey, there's a lot more to do here than just gamble. There's restaurant management positions opening and internships we can open. There's a theater that we can put in the casino where, kids can come and watch movies. There's spa and fitness centers and a lot of opportunities to engage in internship and educational programs that we can all partner with." So I just wanted to get you thinking right off the bat here about what it would look like, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the strengths, the opportunities, the weaknesses, and the threats to communities, college, because that's what we're talking about today, and how that can be threatening and things that we would need to think about if we're going to open up, or if schools, I mean, here, even in Boston, we have the Encore, which is a huge casino right outside Boston, which, and in Boston, there's a whole lot of schools. This, believe me, it matches that 25-mile radius. And there's a lot of, kids know about this casino in this community, and it's part of this. Well, it's not part of this guideline, but anyways, it has an effect, and it's something to think about. So as I promised, we're going to talk about developing young humans. And yes, 12-year-olds, well, maybe some prodigies are in college, but I want to start back here a little bit to let you know that a lot of kids start gambling at a very early age. This might surprise some of you. It may not. I know at 12 years old, I had already started gambling as a young man on Monday Night Football. I talk about it, during a 30-hour workshop that I conduct. But yes, it kind of starts at an early age, even, much younger than with substances. So by the time folks get to college, they may have a taste for gambling, we'll say. So what am I saying here? Am I saying this young girl with the KA Legacy shirt here? What is she? Probably maybe 4 or 5 years old. Are we talking about? Is this apples to apples here when I talk about Bluto? uh, you know, from Animal House, one of my favorite movies of all, great movie. Anyways, so if you don't know who John Belushi's character was in the movie Animal House, I will just put it to you this way: he had a whole lot of fun. Now, are we saying that someone in their young 20s or late teens in college are the same as someone who's 4 or 5? Of course not. But what I will say, the common denominator here is between Bluto here, especially Bluto, if you know the character, you've seen the movie. There are some things that are still developing in a young man or woman, or no matter what gender you are in college at this age. There are still things developing. Okay. Now, it may not be at the same level of a 4 or 5-year-old where you're at when you're 19. I get that. But the reason I put this slide together is there are still things developing in this young girl that are still, believe me, developing. She might be ahead of Bluto if you know his character, but there's some commonalities here. One of the things that's still developing, even in the college years, is your brain, right? So our clients' brains, or our own brains when we were at this age, were still developing. Women develop faster in a lot of areas, including the brain and the frontal lobe, than males, right? With men, it's usually 18, 19, 20, or excuse me, with women, young women, it's 18, 19, 20. With males, it's mid 20s, 24, sometimes 25, until that frontal lobe is fully developed. So what is the frontal lobe? You guys probably know. It has to do with judgment, decision making, and some other things. Now, remember back when we were in college, if we have children now, or if you see folks college age, they're still developing their identity, who they are, what's my major. How do you find these things out? Through experimentation. What you like, what you don't like. Identity development is still going on. And then, of course, the all important peer pressure, the need to affiliate. Do I get into a sorority or a fraternity? What's, again, my major? What club do I want to join into? How do I conform? How do I get acceptance by my peers? And what's my path? Then we're going back to identity development. But we're all working with an underdeveloped brain. Even if you're Bluto, even if you're 20, 21, it's still developing. You're still trying to figure out who you are, right? So all these things are still going on when you're at school. Now, think about that frontal lobe still developing, and think about what really connects with gambling. A lot of people who suffer from gambling disorder, my case that I just got off the phone with, my session I just got off with this young man, just right out, well, he's a little bit older, in his older 20s. But risk is a big thing with those who suffer from gambling disorder and disordered gambling, right? That's one of the connections that can happen, that can develop into a problem. And if your frontal lobe is still developing, right, and you're still working through things, and you're still trying to find out who you are and what you enjoy through experimentation, risk can be an enemy and can develop into a problem. And for something to be a gamble, risk is one of the 3 elements that are needed, right? And then when you're looking at an uncertain event and the goal of winning something larger, and you're a young, starving college student with an underdeveloped frontal lobe, we can see the perfect storm which can happen. This disorder is like any other disorder. It is a condition of distortions, okay? Now, again, think about that frontal lobe, trying to figure out who you are, right? Trying to conform to some group of peers at the college level. Think about that with these distortions. Now, I think there's 9 or 10 here that I talk about in the core gambling class. I'm not going to get to that today, but I just wanted to remind you that this is a condition of distortions that can play into those vulnerabilities of a college age student at a very ripe young age and develop into more. Think about money with a college student. You know, money with a lot of the people I have on my caseload right now who are older adults see money through a distorted lens, right? Hey, you know, if I hit the jackpot, it would be all over. I'd ride off into the sunset, right? So again, we mix this distortion with an underdeveloped brain trying to find out who you are and all these things happening at once with student debt, right? You know, college students, you know, their incomes because they're studying. And, you know, I know with my parents' gas card they gave me in the mid 80s, I used gas, but I used it for a lot of other things too at those convenience stores. So there's the misuse of credit cards, there's impending student loans, that starving student, right? And a lot of times being out on the first time, you know, where it's up to them to manage their, you know, their checking account, their savings account for the first time in their life on their own, right? So we take all this together, these vulnerabilities, the frontal lobe trying to find out who we are, get approval from our peers. I talked about that gambling, you know, those pieces of the gambling, you know, definition that I think have some bearing or effect here on the vulnerabilities, the risk, the hopes of winning something larger. They're a starving college student, and the role of money and the distorted view of money and those distortions. We're going to run into some particular, some developing potential bad situations, right? So I always want to start off with this so you kind of understand what we're working with and dealing with. And that leads me to my first poll question, guys. Let me launch it here. And it's true or false. And I made this very simple on purpose. So everybody try to answer the poll questions, true or false. The 3 areas I just reviewed were regarding adolescence and young adult development are the underdeveloped frontal lobe, identity development, and peer pressure. Mark A if it's true, B if it's false. Wonderful, you guys all got it. It's true, so easy. Okay, so very good. It's those 3 areas. And I want you to stick and think about that because this is gonna lead us, and I'm gonna have to really move. I'm gonna go straight up to the hour, maybe a little bit over. So now I've talked about these vulnerabilities. Let's add college, right? As I said, many of these young people are living on their own for the first time in their lives, away from the social controls of their family during a time of very stressful developmental transitions as their frontal lobe is still developing, as they're trying to figure out who they are, what their major is, and as they're trying to gain approval from their peers. And here I show this from our core gambling 30-hour course, but I think it's important to remember how available, especially post-COVID, well, it's not post yet, but all the online gambling options they have today that are accessible right here, okay? It's acceptable, it happens at a younger age, and there's lower awareness levels. That's why the Illinois Department of Human Services does the great work that they do with us in getting the word out, just like in this webinar. You know, it's about building awareness, but it's not like it used to be because it's so much more accessible, right? It's accepted and it starts at a younger age. Now, the only thing I'll talk about on this slide is that's a pretty high prevalence rate. I think the prevalence rate that's listed on, it's about 6%. I'm going to show you that one. This one came from a slide that Allison put together for me. That's great. But what I would say here is looking at all the different types of games that college students do, the lottery, card games, and sports betting are three of the larger ones. I'm going to try to get to those. College athletes are at very high risk. And just because of the vulnerabilities that I told you about, you know, if you look at the bottom right, their perception, college age folks, of gambling is altered in believing they have a higher than 50% chance of winning. I mean, that's crazy because of lack of life exposure, trying to find out who you are, your brain's still developing, all these things. Now, this lower rate here is what we have listed on the weknowthefeeling.org website. I read through it today. Approximately about 6% of college students in the U.S. have a serious gambling problem. Think about that for a minute, guys. Right now, we're looking at 1% of the adult general population have probably a diagnosable condition of gambling disorder. We're saying 6% have a serious gambling problem. Part of the reason is the vulnerabilities that I just hounded you on. Part of the reason perhaps could be there's some casinos in a lot of the areas of colleges, right? But that is something that we need to be mindful of. That's a lot of kids. That's a lot of students. And here's this is your second learning objective. But gambling problems are often associated with poor academic performance, heavy alcohol consumption, which I'm going to make a connection here in about 10, 15 minutes, nicotine use, and suicide attempts. Okay. Don't have time to go over that one. So what happens is these studies have shown that there's behavioral issues with people that develop gambling problems. It doesn't mean having disordered gambling behaviors is gambling disorder per se, but just having disordered gambling issues create other behavioral issues, psychological issues, interpersonal issues, and academic problems. A lot of it's tied to financial devastation. A lot of it's tied to poor grades and academic problems is listed here. And if it is a true condition, a disorder, gambling disorder, and it's progressing, there's going to be a lot of interpersonal issues that they're going to be suffering from, and psychological issues, and a lot of this comes from a genetic predisposition, either to a substance addiction or a behavioral addiction like gambling disorder. But once it's triggered and it starts to develop, you guys know you do this for a living as well. You're off to the races, literally. Okay, now there was a quick study I'll show you, over 10,000 college students who identified 27 factors that influence their decision to gamble. Just to give you a little context here, these are the three big ones: substance misuse history, ethnicity, and gender. The gender we speak of are males, right? Okay, but we don't want to shut our eyes to women gamblers, young women gamblers, because it's out there as well. Not to generalize, this is what the study found, that those who are ethnically diverse, for example, either African American, Asian American, tend to gamble more often than their European American counterparts. Something I found interesting here, a protective factor, was those who had a parent who raised their children, exposed to the arts and maybe a religion. It was very important. It was a protective factor regarding someone developing or not developing a gambling issue. And I've already come up to the second poll question. So guys, second poll question I will launch here. And it asks, according to what I just talked about, gambling problems are associated with what? Poor academic performance, A, or B, heavy alcohol consumption, or C, nicotine use, D, suicide attempts, or all the above. Guys, these are the easiest questions I think I've ever put together. And as you're answering, I'll give you the answer. It's all the above. And this was one of your learning objectives. The thing here is, this is why we got to keep an eye on this, because of either the comorbid issues that come about, or just the gambling in and of itself. Okay, these are the reasons why. Okay, very good. Okay, you guys, most of you got it right. It's all the above. So I found this very, very interesting here, guys. Look at these top three. Okay, This is a slide I took from, I think, one of our trainings in North Carolina. This might have shifted around, but these are three of the more popular: lottery, sports gambling, casino gambling. Casino gambling can be cards, right? So, Makala here looks like she's of college age. And Makala just won $1 million, right? Through the lottery. Now, the odds of winning the lottery, I always say this: you have a better chance of dying on the way to picking up a lottery ticket than you do winning, right? The lottery funds a great, like in Illinois, we work with the lottery. It's a great game. It's fun, right? And it funds the education programs. It's the fourth largest revenue generator in the state, right? Millions, okay? But it goes to the education of folks in this great state of Illinois. So was saying that, but the odds are horrible, which may say something about the frontal lobe discussion that I had earlier. I found this study done out, I believe, Canada, that talked about the predominance of lottery play with college kids and why. A lot of it was because they were around their parents and their best friends did it. A lot of it was scratch offs and enjoying the socialization and the winning and the excitement. A lot of people ask me, Robbie, do people really have a problem with the lottery or scratches? I have someone on my caseload right now, and I'm so proud to say she's under 30 days, but she's chosen to go an abstinent program. But she was scratching. That's how a lot of how those who suffer from this, they were a scratch for 6 to 7 hours a day. That's what she was doing. It wasn't so much the money, which it was costing the family some money, but their family therapist sent her to me because of the time it's taken away from her being mom in the household. So yes, this can develop into a problem. And when we talk about college students in the college age, I found this 60 Minutes piece on where these college kids figured out at MIT here in Boston how to beat the lottery. And they even incorporated with a company, I think it was a syndicate out of Michigan. They found these 20 MIT mathematicians, these kids on a college campus, and they figured it out. They were making $700,000 in 1 week. Google that 60 Minutes special. I saw it back in 2014 or 15, but it's crazy. It's scary though. But what I want you to think about is you're a college age kid, mathematician, let's say here at MIT or at the U of I in Champaign, and they see this example. What do you think they're going to think? Now, internet gambling, as you know, especially with college age kids, just because of their age, is very, very popular. So I'm just going to kind of shoot through these slides, guys. But I would just want, on the same line of talk with the internet example, if you look at the young men winning a lot of these world poker tournaments, Joe Cada being one, he was what, I don't know, don't quote me, 19 years old. And then Ryan Reese came along a year or two after. As you can see, Ryan is not in his 50s. Ryan looks to be, I think Ryan was 21 or 22. These young men seeing, and even if you're young women and you're seeing this money and all these accolades, what are you thinking? Another example, casino gambling, the movie 21, these card counters, which was an embellished version of what really happened, did happen. And think about this. If you don't know the story behind the movie 21, it covered these kids from Ivy League schools. It just wasn't MIT, speaking of MIT again, but they were from Cornell, all over. But these kids put together a group, and they were going, just not in the US, but all over the world, card counting and communicating to each other at the tables. That's why they got booted out of the casinos. But they made a lot of money. Think about a kid who sees this movie and what they're thinking, college age. Okay. So I talked a little bit about the importance behind internet gaming and its proposed criteria, and the reason I'm showing you this, and this is all the time that I have to show you on gaming, guys, it looks very similar to gambling disorder, right? Take a look at those 9, and now look at these 9. So it can lead to gambling disorder, but it's the time it takes from the college student. And if I had the time, I would talk more to that, but you're going to have these slides. Now, I want to take the next couple of minutes to speak a little bit on sports gambling. And when we talk about sports gambling, yes, it's only in the pro leagues, and the pro leagues are what it's all about, right? With baseball, the NFL, we see it now on, the playoffs are, tomorrow and Sunday. I know the Bears aren't in it, my Cowboys aren't in it, but it's going, and seeing all the football lately, the announcers are talking about making bets right now because they're in cahoots with a lot of these organizations, these betting organizations, right? But what is the NCAA's take on it? Well, thank God, President Mark Emmert's like, no way, Jose, right? And why is he taking such a strong stance? Well, I got a couple more case examples I want to show you. And one of them is at my alma mater where I got my master's in social work in Boston College in 1978 and 79. There was actually one young man who did 10 years over this. But Henry Hill, if you've ever seen the movie Goodfellas, came up from New York City at the Marriott at the hotel here and started meeting with players from the basketball team at Boston College at the time and ended up hiring them. And he probably said something along the lines is, hey, I don't want you to throw the game. I just want you to shave the points so that we all walk away winners. And it was found out. There's an ESPN 30 for 30, which is a show that covers this in detail. But yeah, and then there was another point shaving scandal in North Carolina where we help operate their gambling helpline as well. And it ended this huge tournament they used to do around Christmas because of the same reason, right? And what I would say too, this is from Dr. Daravinsky and Pascas, a study they did. They used this information from the survey that went out in 2012, and it showed that they had been contacted, Division I basketball players, they had been contacted about inside information. And you know why? Point shaving to this day. Now, in the 6-hour version of this class, guys, I have a video that's incredible. And it's from I think the Colombo crime family. And one guy who I think he's out of it now, but he talks about how he used to groom these basketball players to this day. Okay, scary stuff. And if you have a young man or a woman who's college age as a child, and especially if they're an athlete, I don't, but that scares me knowing that this is still going down now, right? So that's part of the reason President Emmert had such a strong, no way, I'm not going to allow that in college sports. This is another article I found actually in North Carolina at the University of North Carolina's paper that talked about an on-site bookie that worked out of the dorm, I think. And he just gave his take on if gambling becomes legalized in North Carolina, would it help or hurt his business? He basically said he was all for it because it would make things above the table. So that's another example of how this still goes on in college campuses. College athletes and gambling, I think it's so important to know about this in our work, because think about a young 18 or 19-year-old who is at the college level successful at sports, or maybe not even starting, but they're good enough to play at the highest level. I know there's professional leagues, but think about to be good enough. And especially if you're a starter and you play at a Division I and you're on national TV, and then you get the chance maybe to bet on the side or do whatever, what you've done, what brings you so many accolades, and you're one of the best at the highest levels, that internal locus of control, that overconfidence, having an underdeveloped brain, trying to figure out who you are, all those things kick in. What do you think that's going to tell a college athlete? That if they can do this well, they can do other things well, right? So it can be an issue. Speaking of that, this is something I did want to show you guys. Most athletes in college violate NCAA wagering rules. And when this was asked to a survey group of males and females, college NCAA athletes, 60% of the males, almost 60%, 59% said, oh, yeah, either agreed or said, yeah, they thought that was true. 48% of the female athletes did. Wagering is acceptable as long as you don't wager on your own sport. 57% males agreed with that. 41% of the women did. Coaches see wagering as acceptable as long as you don't bet on your own game. 41% of the male athletes said that was okay. See, so can we see where this is going with young student athletes at the college level, right? And look at the bottom one. People can consistently make a lot of money gambling. Almost 60% of the young men said that they thought that was true. Almost half of the women, young women thought that was true, which if you know the true odds and you know the troubles and the issues that can come about, often a lot of them are the same with substance addiction disorders. That's kind of scary, right? And I wanted to show this too, the college athlete influences. With young men, coaches have such a big impression. I know even from my high school days, I still think about things that my high school football coach used to tell me, and coaches and baseball coaches. It's just it a big influencer. They're teammates, and of course, they're scared of those NCAA penalties. And when we look at young women, we're looking at teammates more so with the NCAA penalties and coaches. So the reason I bring this up, because this shows an opportunity of where we can go with our prevention programs, right? We can go to coaches. We can go to the NCAA to get the word out about how this is an addiction disorder that can be just as nasty, if not worse or more dangerous than some substance addiction disorders, but it's still a disorder that can really develop and progress into nastiness. I'm not saying one addiction is worse or better than the other, but just the fact that they know these things. And then gambling disorder among student athletes, those are some numbers. They're still higher than their peers. Male almost 2%, and women are much lower, but it's still there, 0.2%, less than a 1%. So that's the little piece that I could do here on student athletes in college. Now we're going to move into comorbid conditions in there, but I'm going to launch our last poll question. And it asks, true or false, guys? According to a 2012 survey that I show very briefly, Dr. Daravinsky and Paskus, they talk about it in their study. Nearly 1 out of 20 Division I student athletes have been contacted for inside information. Is this true or is this false? And this leaves these kids really vulnerable. We know it's true, so I'll let you answer. If you didn't know it's true, you can change because it looks like somebody answered false. And 1 out of 20 doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot. That's 5%. That's still a lot. Think about all the student athletes out there, Division I. 5% of them have been contacted. Thank you guys for answering that. So that could put them at danger, and just betting in and of itself, that's what I've been kind of talking to. Yeah, you see the dangers. Okay, so let's look at this, with gambling and that connection. And I'm going to talk about binge drinking and alcohol use disorder. But it's that risk taking, it's that underdeveloped brain trying to find out who you are and to fit in. All these things can happen at the college level, right? All these things comorbid with gambling disorder. And by the way, gambling disorder in and of itself as a standalone is an exception rather than the rule. So I'm saying this is, if a young student is developing a problem with disordered gambling, there's a really good chance they could have a comorbid condition, either a mood disorder or a substance addiction. I'm going to talk more to a substance addiction here. And according to the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse, I don't really have to tell you guys this, but you probably still know this is still a problem, right? This is still out there, even with all the preventative work done. I mean, starting with the 1993 Harvard College alcohol study to now, even with COVID, this stuff goes down. Binge drinking, alcohol use disorder, the starting elements and things that we see that happen with a drinking or alcohol problem, right? Whatever you want to call it, alcohol use disorder. You guys know. So this is still somewhat alive on college campuses. We've done some great work and good work, I think, as a nation to warn our young folks and to keep an eye on this. But it happens still quite a bit in Greek life, sporting events, at dorm parties, right? And if we go back to that 1993 Harvard study, they found 44% are binge drinkers. And there's so many places where this goes down. It's part of experimenting, finding out who you are. But if your brain's still developing, if you have a predisposition genetically to an addiction disorder, there could be some potential danger that develops real quick. So how does this connect to what we're talking about today? Well, one of the things I want to tell you is 2.6 of the students reported gambling to negatively affect their academic performance. That's enough. That's just gambling. But what this study really showed was there were other things that were connected to gambling that took them away from their studies. One was binge drinking because they were drinking when they were gambling, and drug use. They were using drugs. So that connection was taking them out of their studies. The standalone was 2.6 out of this study alone, right? And if we remember the NESARC study, though this was with adults, the largest, you know, the highest, you know, the disorder that was comorbid the most was alcohol use disorder. And it shows that the link between alcohol, illicit drug use, tobacco use, and gambling is very, very strong. I don't have time to go through all that, but I do want to show you this. This was eye-opening to me. So I know this was done in 2013, but out of 121 undergrad students, they found that the students where they found drank to cope with their stress from school, social stress, whatever it might have been, if that was one of the reasons why they drank to cope, then they were more apt to gamble to cope. So the common link here was coping motives. If that's why they were doing the activity, for one thing, misuse of alcohol, then they were more apt, and there was a larger chance that they were going to gamble to cope as well. And that can be connected, right? Absolutely. Another study showed these were indicators of those who were predictors of, you know, getting into some type of habit of gambling or starting to gamble. Male athletes, Greek organizations. And then some main predictors were behavioral dysregulation. And sometimes at this age, we have to decipher and look at that behavioral dysregulation to see, is this an indicator of addiction disorder or a mood disorder, or is this just an underdeveloped frontal lobe thing? Is this, what is it? But these are predictors that we would need to look at, like involvement on campus, either through athletics or Greek life, sensation-seeking behaviors, all these things. And again, risk factors down there: Greek affiliation, alcohol use disorder, alcohol use frequency, athletics. This comorbid condition with the alcohol and the gambling, there is a connection which puts our young students at somewhat what the evidence is showing here, and what I'm showing you from studies, there's a connection. And there's things that, so what are some preventative services that we can focus on? This is one of the last learning objective I want to show you. They're very simple, and they're you probably know them as I've gone through them. What can we do? And what can we do out there as far as preventative measures? One is to screen. If you have someone coming, and I know on campuses, the clinicians and the counselors who serve the population of the students and even faculty, if someone comes in for alcohol use disorder, why not do a live bet questionnaire on them? 2 questions. Why not ask and screen for gambling as well? We can piggyback this, comorbidly to speak, right? We can piggyback some type of gambling screen when somebody's coming in for a substance addiction disorder screen, right? And we can start that conversation. It should already be going, right? Why? That's a big prevention opportunity because of the interrelatedness that I've just shown you in the last 5 minutes between alcohol use disorder and problem gambling and binge drinking and gambling issues, right? Raising awareness levels for what I talked about in the opening about casinos near college campuses. I know it's in Illinois. I got some texts from you. I know it's here in Massachusetts. We know it's in New York. You know, and it's strategy somewhat, right? I don't think they're trying to make these kids sick, but boy, they're exposing them to some things that they're very vulnerable to. And I covered that in the very first part of this talk. But more research is needed, right? I did want to brag on a little bit about what LifeWorks has done in North Carolina. Allison Drain has put together through some grants some incredible prevention programs with some of the local universities there, you know, that included some of the things I just spoke on: screening, outreach, National Screening Day here at some of these colleges that Allison's done some great work in. And these slides are all available. And I'm sorry, guys, I'm already at the hour. It's 1 p.m. And I'm so sorry I had to shoot through this so fast. But I'm going to stay on if you have any questions. I'm going to look at the chats. You can stay on as long as you need to. And by the way, the recorded version of this will be available, I believe, via the website. I'm going to have these slides too. And I'm sorry, I should have I should have shaved this down more. I had some time constraints, but I would rather overbite with information than underbite. So you'll have the slides. I'm available for more questions. But what I want to put out to you guys is this is an issue that we've got to keep our eye on our college age students on campuses and away from campuses. I gave some great, I think we gave you some preventative solutions anyways to some things. And I think we just need to keep our eyes. And if part of our caseload, which part of mine is, I talked with mom today on one of my young 19-year-olds who's at a local college here. It's not about gambling, but we we need to know these things so we can provide education to this population and we can keep our eye out on it, right? Because with more and more legalized gambling options, especially with sports gambling, I talked about that in about 10 minutes ago about student athletes. And even if you're not a student athlete, just being of the age of betting on sports and the accessibility on our phone, in-game betting and all these things, it's a real danger that we need to keep an eye on, right? Okay, let's see here. I'm going to, and if you guys need to drop, I understand. Let's see here. I'm trying to see if, okay, Kimberly, I got you. Thank you, Carrick. College students have all the answers. I know. I just got finished with my with a class at Boston College this past fall, and they do have all the answers, right? Especially in graduate school. Let's see what else. Any questions that I can answer? Okay. Oh, hold on. Here's a good question. I think college students is the ethnic. I can't. My gosh. Hold on. I'm sorry. Is the ethnic diverse population gambles to increase their income? I don't know, Doug. Good question, but it could be. And again, I don't want to generalize upon any ethnic population in gambling, but the study did list, I believe, African American and Asian perhaps students for whatever reason. It could be cultural. I don't know, but I don't know the reason. But that's a good question, and that's something that we could assess for. Thank you, Ellen. I'm getting a lot of thank yous. They are making gambling like a normal part of life. It's crazy. You're right, Ellen. And it's really gambling, if someone has a predisposition to this, and especially if they're young, there's not a lot of information. We're all out there trying to fight that, but this can look just like substance use disorder. And when a young man or woman or any gender have this, they're confused because there's not a lot of, can you really be have a problem with a game? Absolutely. So getting the word out on campuses, I think is one of the key points I wanted to hone in on there at the end. Thanks, Ken. Good seeing you. Are there age restrictions at casinos from Rita? Yeah, I believe so. Depending on what the state law is, right? They couldn't, let people underage gamble, depending on what that age is. I don't know, and frankly, I don't know enough. Does anybody know? I would imagine that is the job of casino staff and security staff to make sure that people, are, following the rules and the age restrictions. But I don't know how that's carried out and what the specific age restriction of the state might be, right? Sports betting companies sponsoring sporting events. Yes, they do. Sports betting companies are sponsoring a lot of sporting events. Anna, can you provide more on sports betting info and how can we help the college student? There's a lot in the slides here, but yeah, there's a lot to the sports gambling thing and how student athletes, are approached. The Colombo family, I think you can Google it, maybe in YouTube, if you YouTube it. There's the Colombo family. That's where we got it. I got it from Allison, but they talk a little bit about the effect that they have on student athletes and how they groom them. And again, this was a pretty recent recent interview, so it's good to watch. But it's I think we have to educate folks on sports gambling and even this particular population even more so, and let them know. And I use the comparison of substance use disorder and connect that and tell them it can look very similar, meaning once you start, you can't stop. There's more financial devastation. There's lying. There's progression of condition, meaning what you start off with, it progresses and you need to bet more and more and you lose more and more. And make those comparisons and educate. If you have a practice, or even if you work in an agency, if you have college age kids that you're seeing for addiction disorders or even mood disorders, you can ask a little bit about their life and how gambling is exposed into their life. Let's see here. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Christine. 21, and that's what my guess was. If that's different, maybe I can email everybody as far as minimum age gambling. Yes, thank you, Anna. Good question, Anna. Do you have some support strategies for parents? It's kind of like gaming. It's kind of like other things with parents and going off to college. I think educating the parents and letting them know that this can develop into a problem like a drinking problem. The brain can light up the same. There can be just like how I answered the other talk, and keeping an eye on this with their kids and having an open line of communication. But it first starts with educating them. I never knew. And I will tell you, I'm a career changer. So, I graduated, 2013. So I learned out of school when I joined BDA. I really got hungry to know more about this behavioral addiction. So heck, this is where I'm landed now. This is where a lot of my focus of my practice is. I do a lot of talks here because it's real. So we need to make that real to our parents, and it starts with educating, having a talk, and an open line of communication. Um, you know, I'm not one that's going to say, stick to white or black thinking. I'm just going to say educate them. And if they are gambling, they're playing even something like fantasy sports, they're betting online, just make sure, you know, teach them what responsible gaming might look like and keep an eye on it, right? If the family comes from a background of addiction disorders, genetic predisposition, either even to other mental health issues, then the talk might be a little bit different, right? You got to keep an eye on that, definitely. But educating, letting them know, and having an open line communication with their kids, especially their young adult children. Okay, I think that's it, guys. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I've had to talk so fast and so quick. As usual, I try to put too much into a 50 minutes, but I wanted to share all the great information with you. I'll get this together and we'll have it on the website. If you have any other questions, let me put up my contact information again. There's so much in this, guys. I probably should have divided this up. There I am. It's great seeing everybody, seeing the familiar names and the faces. I hope you got something out of today, maybe even if it was a review. And I want everybody to have a great weekend and stay warm because, I know how cold it is out here in Boston. And if it's cold in Boston, gosh, I can't imagine Chicago. So everybody have a great weekend. Great seeing you. And please tune in next week, next Friday. Same, as I said, bat channel, same bat time, 12 p.m. straight up. We've got Nancy Phillips and Penny Reno speaking on gambling disorder, working with families. Thanks, guys. Everybody have a great day and a great weekend.